Okay, excellent. So here's the giant leap of faith part of the meeting, okay? I'm going to call on the facilitators, and they're going to report back what they heard from the group. And if it's possible, what I'd love to see is if you've got a summary chart or something like that, if you want to walk it up and stick it behind here, or if you're, we'd like to try that. Or you can stand there, whatever that's the leap of faith part of this. I think we're gonna report out from there, and then at the end you can stick whatever you want up here so we can all see it. All right? You get the first prize for going first. Take it away.
Thank you. Well, the prize goes to my participants at this table. Let's give them a hand. We identified a total of 9 items, and then they drilled it down to 5 that are probably really critical. I think they're all really awesome. Let me cover those that they identified. That these are absolutely top considerations that DOE should consider in the consent-based siting process. One of them is, what is the specific problem that's being addressed at that particular site or that plant or that hazardous waste? Get really clear, the size, the scope, the footprint, etc. What's the nature of the problem? How long does this need to be addressed? That's one of them. All right, what's the problem? Another one is, who pays for this? How is it paid for? When is it paid? And one of the examples that came up is sometimes the hidden costs that can trickle out, as the example that came out from the mayor of Zion. And sometimes the locals end up paying for much more than they thought. So how is it paid for? How is it financed? All of the long-term costs that come into play. Another one is the level of awareness, and the opposite of that, the ignorance of people as to what they don't know might hurt them in the long run. A good example was GMOs. And we still don't know what's happening to our food supply in that regard. What do we not know that's happening to hazardous waste and how that might impact our health in the long run? So that needs to be addressed. Another one here is very clearly define the community that is impacted, the community or the location if that's in the middle of nowhere. And we started literally having kind of a laundry list of some of the impacts that you may identify: demographics, economics. What is their level of distress? What's their motivation to wanting to be involved in this? Is this adjacent to water, traffic, other patterns and things like that? So there's other areas here. What are the political jurisdictions, et cetera? Clearly define the community that needs to go into the consideration. Another one is, this is really the really long view here, which is we must have an ongoing monitoring of the sites. There can be sometimes some quick impetus to establish a site, to establish a permanent site, but how are they going to feel 20 years from now or 200 years from now? So that needs to be monitored. Current sites, permanent sites, how is it being monitored, and is that transparent information? So did I cover them all, team? Okay, we covered them all. There were some other ones that were up there, and that'll be submitted in writing. So again, thank you.
Now we're going to go over into the corner.
And now you get to hear from the team in this corner. Let's give them a hand. I don't know if you guys could hear us, but we had a lively conversation. So tried to boil it down into 3 points. First one is questioning the premise of centralized interim storage. Instead of moving it someplace and then taking it to permanent, maybe instead you keep the interim where they are now, make that the interim storage, invest in those communities. So the legitimacy of the process. We also talked about needing consent from Congress. That needs to be happening now, making sure that everybody's on board, starting at the top. The second one kind of goes with something that Bill had said, is informed consent even possible? And part of it is because it's long-term. And we have the word generational equity. What people are agreeing to now administrations are going to change, city councils are going to change, citizens are going to change, et cetera. And we need to make sure it's clearly defined who's going to have responsibility for what. For the monitoring, for accidents, for things that are unknown now, what's the process for working through those and making sure that everyone knows their responsibility as these changes happen. And then the third we talked about was the political and corporate agendas to continue nuclear power. Is that what's driving this and the motivation behind it? We need to be very clear on, again, what the problem is, but what's driving it, and making sure that we are attacking the things that we need to be attacking so that the motivation is clear and understood as we're driving toward a consent-based process. Oh, and social equity is another comment under, can we really ever get informed consent?
Thank you very much.
Hi, we're the table in the front corner, and we had a very lively discussion and collected a lot of information. We came up with 4 pieces as the most important considerations. One is informing a community's independent assessment of the problem and the need, the pros and the cons, the need versus the consequence. Number 2 is trust. To capture the DOE, capturing the community's trust, must understand the needs, the values, and the concerns of the community. Number 3 is transparency, providing clear, concise information in a way that considers all perspectives. And last but not least, number 4, the stability of the process, the robustness of the process that is tested, works, and is long-term in scope and interests. Thank you.
Now the best group will go. So I just want to, no, I'm just kidding out there. It's just such a hard touting that. They just cut me off the webcast. Okay, so our group had some great discussion, and already there's some common themes among the other groups. So that was a good thing. And we had a great discussion as well. As we started speaking, flowchart diagrams started coming up in my mind, and so the group permitted me to draw some boxes here around one of the items we found. And one of the themes that came out was this idea of site solicitation on the front end instead of on the back end. In other words, we go through the process and we kind of pick some site, but almost this kind of idea of, are there communities that would want to consider this? Not that they're candidates, not that we're doing, just consider it. And it was interesting that discussion went to some different places, but was one thing they said that would be kind of box number 1 on the site solicitation. Let's start there. And then going through this national dialogue, and they said this was part of that process. The step 2 would be, let's have a national dialogue as to what the eventual sites would look like, and then put together a plan for how that would work, and always come back to this national dialogue through that plan. So it would be adaptable, it would be flexible. Those were key words that came through that. And then eventually to that site selection. So that was kind of theme number 1 or that they went through. Second was the idea, and this was the first thing mentioned and the last thing mentioned, is transportation issues. And really transportation information. There were even questions like, is it a train a day? Is it a train every 6 months? I mean, there were some very specific questions around how are we going to, during this national dialogue, really inform those that live in these communities about what this really means. And it brought up a larger issue of really this idea of educating a public that may not even know there's a problem to begin with. And what's the solution going to be? So there was some great discussion around, and the detailed charts around transportation that needed to be answered early in the process in this national dialogue. And the last one was around, and Janice, you said this with your group and some others, around transparency to ensure that we're being able to, through this plan, continually have this national dialogue. One of the examples that Dave gave was over, when the national labs release their data, how are we educating the public on what that data is? As there are peer reviews, and are we making sure local communities have the information they need to make thumbs up or down choices, rather just, hey, we need 300 jobs next week, let's do this. So there was some great discussion around making sure throughout this process there's a continual education part. So that was a good thing, true transparency. Thank you, group. They did a great job.
Thank you, Stu. I had a really great group who were very thoughtful, and they survived my charting. But there were a number of important issues. One is that people felt that a new organization was needed. Reasons: more insulated from politics, a fresh start. There's too much history with DOE. The new organization could make long-term decisions because of availability of waste funds sort of outside the appropriations process. Education and expertise, the provision of that to the communities would be facilitated. But interestingly enough, is that DOE should not wait for a new organization. Too important to pass up this opportunity to do it now. There was a comment about the fact that this all started sort of external to the political process, in the sense that the Blue Ribbon Commission made recommendations and that DOE is following along in this extra political approach by trying to figure out how to define a consent-based process, and DOE's efforts could be a motivation for Congress to act on the new organization. We also talked about that a new paradigm is needed, the need to involve groups in the community, environmental justice groups, economic development groups, whatever, that it just can't be the standard, we're going to go to the political governance of the community, and that there needs to be more on the ground in the community engagement. You need to be out there talking to the groups in the community, and that includes the regulator. The NRC should be out there talking to the people in the community so that the community understands what the regulatory element of this process is. And let's see. This one was important, is that although everybody agreed that there needs to be a solid technical basis for any decision, for any qualification of a site, that DOE should establish qualification criteria for consent from the social equity point of view. This all got started, this discussion got started because of some of the comments that were made about communities who are in financial straits, just wanting to take a site so that they could solve their financial problems. And the qualification criteria go to the point of identifying any limitations in a community that might not lead to a long-term solution, that might lead to the site being abandoned, or any sort of negative comments. And there was also a point made about the qualification criteria could lead to how grant money might be channeled to those community organizations, not just to the governing body, but to those organizations in the community that are very important, and not just environmental, but economic development. And finally, again, strong technical basis for intergenerational time spans. One admonition that this is a long-term, this consent process is a long-term process, and it has to be carefully done. But as was pointed out, don't disenfranchise the existing sites like Zion, wherever, that might want the waste out of there sooner rather than later. Same token, don't prevent them from being part of a consent-based process to have that site be a storage place. then that's what we had. Thank you.
Thank you all. So with that, we're going to move to the public comment portion of this meeting. All right. Again, this is one of several opportunities for members of the public to offer their input and thoughts to the department about consent-based siting. I mentioned the sign-up sheet. We've got 4 people signed up. Given where we are on the schedule, we're looking at about 5 minutes per person. And we're going to set up a mic here. And we've got Tim in the back, just to keep track of time. He's got 2 cards. He's got a yellow one and a red one. The yellow one means you got a minute left, and the red one means it's time to pass the mic on to the next person. So the names I've got for the public comment period are in the order they were written down. I've got Kevin Camps, I've got Gail Snyder, Elaine Kahn, and Beth Bushbaum. And if you could, pardon me? Okay, and I'm sorry, and your name would be? Okay. All right. And what's your name again? I'm sorry. Okay. All right, that's fine. So I've got 3 people: Kevin Camps, Gail Snyder, and Elaine Kahn. And you would like to speak as well? Yeah. Okay. So we'll put. And what's your name? I'm sorry.
Mo Hennington.
Mo Hennington. Okay. So there's a mic here. Kevin's up first. We've got Tim in the back keeping track of time. The reason we set it up is that so members of the public can address the larger audience in which DOE is present. And with that, Kevin, ready?
Yep.
All right, welcome.
Thank you. My name is Kevin Camps, and I serve as radioactive waste specialist at Beyond Nuclear and on the board of directors of Don't Waste Michigan, representing the West Michigan chapter. And I was going to start out with some Anishinaabe Moween, which is the local native language here. Kevin Camps, Indigenous, Kalamazoo, Michigan, and Danjiba, Ani, Anishijiba Mino Begwejagud. I said, my name is Kevin Camps. I come from Kalamazoo, Michigan. How are you? Hello. It's a beautiful day. And the reason I do all that is because we are on Anishinaabe land. Coming in here today, I saw the sign for Pokagon State Park in Indiana, Pokagon Potawatomi in southwest Michigan, survived the trail of death, were left alone by the U.S. Army because they had converted to Christianity. They own their land by having bought it in the white economy way back in the 1830s. So what I'd like to say, one of the questions was fairness. How could a consent-based siting process be fair? And I said these very things to the Blue Ribbon Commission on America's Nuclear Future at its first meeting. I think it was March 25th of 2010. A lot of familiar faces from that process. Timothy Frazier in the back of the room was designated federal officer. Mary Woolen had a community outreach role for the Blue Ribbon Commission. John Kotek was staff director for the BRC. Dr. Moniz was a member of the Blue Ribbon Commission. And I begged and pleaded the Blue Ribbon Commission that very first day and for the 2 years of that proceeding, do not target Native American tribes again for these waste dumps. Well, very much so. Just do a search on the PDF of the Blue Ribbon Commission final report for how many times tribal comes up. This is environmental injustice. This is radioactive racism. How can you put it? No, it's not. It is, John. It's very much, it's racist. This is racist. Let's look at Skull Valley Goshoots, targeted for private fuel storage, limited liability corporation, which was the nuclear industry picking up the reins after the DOE's own nuclear waste negotiator went away. So Grace Thorpe, what's really ironic about the Blue Ribbon Commission is that President Obama established it. And, his energy secretary at the time, Chu, put it together, hired all you folks to run it. In March of 2009, and I brought this up to the Blue Ribbon Commission that first day, President Obama passed a proclamation for Women's History Month. He honored Rachel Carson. He honored the woman who preserved the Everglades. He honored Grace Thorpe. Back to the Pokagon Potawatomi. Grace Thorpe, Pokagon Potawatomi, daughter of Jim Thorpe, athlete of the century. She's also Sac and Fox, as was her father. The nuclear waste negotiator sends a letter to every recognized federal tribe in the country. Wouldn't you like to host nuclear waste on an interim basis? We'll give you money. Her tribal council said, yes, we're interested in that money. A few days later, Grace Thorpe had all of those people thrown out of office and replaced. Her reason? She had served in Nagasaki after the bombing. She knew what nuclear was capable of. She wanted none of that in her community. She took her message on the road and helped those other 60 tribal communities who had initially said yes, out of the hundreds who received letters, to turn it back. And then Private Fuel Storage picked up the reins after that process went down to defeat and tried to make it happen at Skull Valley Goshoots in Utah. $50 to $200 million was offered by the nuclear power industry to this low-income community. Margene Bull Creek, who was the lead opponent, along with Sammy Black Bear at Skull Valley Goshoots, said, we are traditionals, this is our land, we don't want this for our future generations. They were harassed, intimidated, made to pay dearly by the corrupt tribal chairman who excommunicated them from federal monies that they were due. They were made to suffer for a very long time. Sammy Black Bear, somebody shot at him across the desert. Was it a warning? Was it a missed shot? So yes, this is very much racism. I love your smile, John. That's a beautiful smile. So I would leave Native Americans alone. I'm glad you had an environmental justice speaker on the panel. That was very valuable. I hope that you will listen to what she had to say and her staff person had to say. And I'll just close because my time is up, but try forcing this stuff on communities against their will. And the example I will put out there for you to think about is Gorleben, Germany. Tens of thousands of people blocking the road, locking their necks to train tracks. That is when a community says no. And if you force us to do such things, then we will see you there. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. And now, Gail Snyder.
Hello, I'm Gail Snyder. I serve as board president of Nuclear Energy Information Service, which is based here in Illinois. Illinois has the most nuclear reactors of any state in the nation. We have the most stored nuclear waste from nuclear power of any state in the nation. Most of us didn't consent to that. Licenses on nuclear reactors are being extended. We would say rubber stamped by the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, so that the original 40-year licenses are extended for another 20 years, and there's talk of extending those for another 20 years. Did those communities consent to that long-term nuclear power facility in their communities when they originally agreed to them in the beginning? This is the history of the nuclear industry. This is what they're trying to do now, and this is our concern about what may happen with this very process. That's why we question if this process is really a process that should continue. We think it should be a national conversation, that Congress should be involved, and the public needs to be informed. The Department of Energy is tasked with promoting nuclear energy. So, when we go through this process, we know that the motivation to move the nuclear waste is to promote nuclear energy, to encourage further nuclear energy, to clear the spent fuel pools and remove the liability from the nuclear industry and onto the backs of the citizens. Now, that was the original agreement, that we would take the nuclear waste, but we didn't agree to an interim storage facility with increased liability for some infinite amount of time. We had, as a government, agreed to take the waste and put it in a permanent geological repository. So we're getting an additional liability burden amongst the taxpayers and the public and the environment as this is shipped around the nation. It's very unnecessary. I think other alternatives have not really been explored. This is a big industry, moving nuclear waste, storing it at other sites, hiring people to manage the sites, hiring subcontractors. This is all what will happen if this process moves forward. This is not a safety issue. Removing the nuclear waste as it exists right now is not a safety issue. So they say. But if it's a safety issue, then why has it been safe to keep the nuclear waste there for as long as we have? The NRC, the government, the Department of Energy, the nuclear industry have said we are safe. It's safe there. It's contained. It's okay. But now all of a sudden it has to move. So it can't be a safety issue. And I just want to point that out to people. Don't fall for an idea that this is unsafe to keep it where it is, and now we have to move it. It is unsafe. I would say it is unsafe. But it's not going to be safer somewhere else. We're just going to actually increase the amount of concern and the probability of an accident if we move it around to another site. Thank you.
Thank you, Gail. Elaine Kahn? Okay. So now, looks like our final, I'm sorry. I've got her first, and then we can come to you. Is that all right? All right. Thank you.
I'm Maureen Headington. I'm president of the Stand Up Save Lives campaign. I am a past director on the board of the Illinois Environmental Council, on which I served for 6 years, my last 2 as their vice president. I'm very active in community affairs. I'm public policy chairman for the Western Suburbs American Association of University Women, and also on a board that the Hinda Institute dealing with prison reform, which is important for Illinois in terms of our financial situation and getting both sides to the table. It's something that would benefit everyone. I've been involved in environmental issues ever since moving to our, quote, dream home in Burr Ridge, put in an English garden, and we thought we'd stay. I didn't know that I was living within 5 miles of Argonne Laboratory, had no idea what was being done there. Also, that I live within the sacrifice zone of both Braidwood and the Dresden plants. And it's something that should we ever move again, it would be on my mind to check out, not just what's down the street, but what's down the road within 5 miles, because if you're talking about evacuation, you're talking about 50 miles. As I glance over this room, I can't help but notice that Illinois, the state that houses more nuclear reactors and has more nuclear waste than any other, this room should be packed. I'm grateful that the people who are here, but this should be wall-to-wall people and probably in a bigger venue. You have failed to engage the public thus far in this discussion. This is an issue that I repeatedly raised during the GNEP, Global Nuclear Energy Partnership hearings and meetings that I attended. The local press never heard of the project, nor did my mayor. Therefore, in my testimony, I requested that local press and municipal governments be notified of all DOE activity since we live in proximity to Argonne. Clearly, you are not doing your job. It is not the responsibility of an environmental activist like myself to inform the general public about information, or the environmental groups within the state, and God bless David Kraft, because for a state like this, we should have many enviro groups that are focused on nuclear. Therefore, a response, It is not the responsibility of the environmental community to inform the general public about information they have a right to know. Therefore, in response to your written question, 1, how can the department ensure that the process for selecting a site is fair? I suggest an unprecedented effort by DOE to engage the public, beginning with seeking public input during these meetings. Therefore, notice and a summary of the subject should be given adequately at least a month in advance to major local and social media, government entities, state and local, first responders, including police, fire, and medical, civil groups, local associations, interested stakeholders, colleges, meetings attended in person or by webinar, which I know you are doing. No registration required. I was very upset yesterday when I saw it said you're no longer accepting anyone to sign up, and I just came and the nice woman greeted me. But everyone should be open, and someone on the street should be able to come in. You shouldn't have to be signed up to speak. Notice at least 4 weeks prior to a date of hearing and video of hearings available. In response to your second question, what should be involved in the process for selecting a site and what is their role? Once potential host sites are identified, a consent-based siting process should include all affected entities, additional public meetings and hearings, adhering to the guidelines I just stated, agreement by state and county governing bodies, as well as tribal governments, in addition to acceptance by the host communities and acceptance by all adjacent communities to that host community. Agreement by all communities that will be impacted by transport routes, including truck, barge, and rail to that host community. DOE, NRC, and EPA must be open, honest, and transparent as to the risks and benefits of all potentially impacted parties. Consent means it must be informed consent. Fact, based on maps for a west location, which was the example was Yucca Mountain when it was being entertained, several thousand shipments of nuclear waste would travel through 43 states past the homes of 50 million Americans for 25 years. Shipments will be frequent and will occur over many years. Many communities will be exposed to large amounts and frequent shipments of nuclear waste. DOE reports that the region of impact for public health and safety along transport routes is 800 meters or 5/10 mile on either side of the central line of transportation for non-accident conditions and 80 kilometers or 50 miles for accident conditions.
If I may, I'm just
Yeah.
checking in on time.
Oh,
You've reached
okay.
your 5-minute limit, but if it's okay with you, if we could let others speak, and if there's any extra time, you can finish
Okay,
up. Would that
yeah,
be okay?
I don't have much more. I'd be happy to.
All right, thank you very much. All right, we've got.
I'm Jan Bodart, a member of the board of Nuclear Energy Information Service, and I have to go get my glasses, sorry.
We won't start the clock until you come back with your glasses. How's that?
This is going to work okay.
Excuse me, you were going to start public comments at 4:45?
Right.
So someone just arrived to speak.
That's okay. We've got a little more time.
Thank you.
Okay.
I wanted to make a comment on the engagement of the public that was brought up. At Nuclear Energy Information Service, we really wanted to let people in Zion know that these public meetings, or so-called public meetings, were happening. But we realized that in order for a person to really understand that a public meeting is happening and they should be there, they have to see it 13 times. Once on TV, once in the newspaper, on the radio, lots of different venues for them, for the public to see something, and then finally they'll think, well, maybe I should go. And we could not afford to inform the people of Zion 13 different times that this meeting was taking place. So as a result, the meetings were extremely poorly attended, and we had the cafeteria in the high school empty except for a little corner. I just wanted to say something else about safety near the plants that Gail brought up. The nuclear, and I don't know who, somebody in the government service, I think it was the NRC, decided to not do a study of, it was the Academy of Sciences that had planned a study. Somebody said, well, we can't afford it, which was absolutely silly. The fact is they didn't want to know what the results of living near a nuclear plant, even if there's no accident, just a regular, what the results are if you do a circular study, like 1 mile, 2 miles, et cetera. And I don't know what this one means, but anyway, I wanted to talk about casks. A woman, Diane Gilmore from California, has done a deep study of the dry casks, and everybody needs to be informed as to what her study revealed about dry cask storage. But then unfortunately, my main subject was a hearing that I went to a webinar that took place in Washington, D.C., but I was still in Chicago. I got it online, or I was at it, but it was on my computer. It was sponsored by Fred Upton, who is the representative over in southwestern Michigan, and I'm sure that Cook Plant is in his jurisdiction, as well as, I think Palisades might be, but I'm not sure. But he conducted a hearing about shipment of nuclear waste, and it was truly chilling. There was a long testimony by Bob Quinn, and he went through all of the different processes by which nuclear materials are shipped through the United States. It's being done all the time. The conclusion was there are about 1 million shipments per year of nuclear materials on the waterways, roads, railroads, and air in the United States. And then he said something that is my pet peeve. He said, no one has ever been harmed by any of these shipments. Well, I just told you that the NRC decided they couldn't afford to do a health study. And to be really, really charitable, I would say, which I did, I was at the LaSalle meeting for the new licensing at LaSalle, and somebody said the same thing. We did blah, 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 and no one was harmed. It was a matter of changing things from the fuel pool to the dry casks. And all I can say is, you're not doing a study of whether people are harmed or not. These studies have been done. They do show that people are harmed. And you don't do a study. I'm not saying this to anybody here. Okay, people, they do not do a study. They don't know whether anybody's been harmed because they don't want to know. And then they make a real big general statement, no one has ever been harmed. I know. Okay, to be very charitable, if I said I know that people have been harmed, that would be just as erroneous when there has been no information whatsoever about people, whether people were harmed or not. And I really get angry when I hear people say, we did such and such with radiation and no one has ever been harmed or no one was harmed. We don't know, but I don't believe that. I think I know, that people have been harmed by these nuclear power plants by transferring used fuel pellets from the fuel pool to the dry cask. you can't handle nuclear stuff without harm. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do I understand we've got a couple people who want to speak as well, who maybe didn't sign the form? That's fine. I'm just trying to figure out who they would be. I've got two here. All right. So whoever wants to come up first.
Well, I think it's good that this was meant to have a discussion, including the public and some people from the government and maybe some from industries, because I think discussion is good. But I guess I'm wondering about the premise, to begin with, of the discussion of consent. Because I don't understand why we need to move this stuff around the country. We're going to be moving radioactive materials from places that are already radioactive. We're going to be moving them to other places which will become radioactive, and all the other places in between which may become random sacrifice zones. I think there is also danger of having this stuff being exposed if you're too close to it. What if this stuff is stuck and I'm next to it on the highway and I'm in a traffic jam or there's an accident? Just being near it is not safe. Sometimes we have the discussion couched in, oh, it's all going to be safe, but nuclear is unsafe inherently. So we've created it. Now we have the task as a country to figure out what to do with this stuff. You can't guarantee the safety of it. Nobody can. So why make new communities unsafe? So I guess my question in this whole consent process is, what is the motivation? What is the agenda for moving this stuff around? If we do this, in Chicago certainly we have been the railroad hub for a while. We are going to be moving this along our railroad tracks, of which we have many here in this town. I don't think there's a single neighborhood that doesn't have a railroad through it. Of course, we have so much nuclear waste. I guess one of the motivations by some people is that we have to move the waste so we can make more waste. And there are other solutions. The nuclear industry is an old paradigm. It's an old technology. It's never been a very good one. You can just look at Fukushima. You could look at Chernobyl. You could look at 3 Mile Island. And I can give you dozens of other examples of very unsafe nuclear projects. So why are we not focusing our time and energy on renewables, on going forward with the new generation of energy? If anybody wants to say that nuclear is good for the climate, I don't buy that. We've created so much fallout up in the troposphere, and when it rains, it's coming down in different places. Fukushima and these other accidents and all the nuclear testing we've had, we've already nuked our climate. There's fungus growing up there. God knows the brew that we're making. So why do we want to make more of it? So I leave you with those thoughts, but I envision a better and safer future, and I hope that you're all on the same page with me for that. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Dr. Laura Chamberlain. I'm a family physician here in Chicago and also an environmentalist. and an organizer for Frack Free Illinois and Chicago Oil by Rail, and also supporter of Nuclear Energy Information Service. So I'm very upset that I missed the rest of the public comment period. You advertised it as 4:45 and you started early. I'm kind of upset about that. But anyways, I'll forgive you. So I want to list all of the aspects of informed consent that I can think of in this situation. Because I'm a physician, I know what informed consent is. Informed consent is where you discuss fully with somebody the risk and benefits of all the options available to them, and any even unforeseen complications that could occur. So let me list all of the consent-based citing testimony that I would want a community to hear, and this probably is an incomplete list, but we would like to hear from public health specialists and environmental specialists on environmental impacts, geneticists, pediatricians, OB-GYNs, oncologists, independent transportation specialists, including union workers for the rail lines, the shipping, and the trucking. Independent nuclear scientists to testify to the risk and the risk to a community, and also the length of the risk to the community. Independent geologists to testify about the siting and the complications that they can see with the geology of the location. I definitely want to encourage independent scientists. So we would be talking about scientists from around the world that would come in and talk to a community about the risks and benefits. Remember, the risk and benefits of every option need to be outlined to a community before they can actually have an informed consent. I hope that everybody in this room is thinking in terms of that kind of testimony. It's going to be quite a meeting. I would like to be there for that week-long or 2-week-long meeting to talk about the risks and benefits to a community. Without informed consent, true informed consent, which is adequate timing, the information needs to get out to the community that this is actually going to occur. The community must participate by being able to ask it questions, to understand fully high-level scientific concepts. Without that kind of consent, you do not have informed consent. So I open that up to some dialogue. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I don't see any other public comment, folks. Can I turn over the last few minutes to you? Would that be all right?
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Anytime.
Again, I'm Mo Headington. It's a fact and experience has shown that property values decline significantly along nuclear waste routes. Using the Department of Energy's own data, it was estimated that between 70 and 310 accidents and over 1,000 incidents would occur during the nuclear waste shipping campaign to Yucca Mountain if trucks were used as the preferred mode, and between 50 and 260 accidents and over 250 incidents if trains were used as the preferred mode. DOE also estimated that a severe accident in a rural area releasing a small amount of radiation would contaminate 42 square miles for well over 1 year. A similar accident in an urban area would have devastating consequences to the economy and to public health. Insurance does not cover radiological incidents. Neither homeowners insurance nor health insurance covers problems caused by radiological accidents. The Price-Anderson Act limits liability for the nuclear power industry if there is an event or an accident. So basically, the taxpayer himself or the taxpayers collectively have to pick up that tab, in addition to the tab for building the things in the first place with all the subsidies that they're given. Before you seek willing hosts, you must address critical issues, including the well-documented leaks that are at nearly every reactor site. Tritium is just so common. Braidwood had it for 10 years and didn't inform their public about it. Casks that are of very thin stainless steel that were selected based on price, not quality. These are not the same casks that Europe is using, which are much thicker and put into much denser housing in addition. The casks that were chosen by NRC cannot be monitored, inspected, maintained, or repaired. Cracking can be expected in as little as 5 years. Most of the fuel now being used at reactors is called high burnup fuel. It's exactly what it sounds like, even more damaging to the containers. Not all communities are equipped with hazmat. According to the American Society of Civil Engineers, our nation's crumbling infrastructure and system of highways, roads, bridges is rated D+, making it prone to accidents. Before any plan should be contemplated regarding consent, these issues must be addressed, and the consent must be one of informed consent on risks and benefits. So the question is, can we trust EPA, DOE, and the NRC? Despite public concern, NRC canceled a study of cancer risks in communities near power plants. That was a Wall Street Journal article. Whoops, sorry. That I have here somewhere in my hand if anyone wants to see it. That does not instill confidence. These are aging plants working beyond the years for which they were intended. Yet NRC has yet to meet a license renewal it has not liked. The risk, friends, is all ours. Any community that is fully knowledgeable of all the facts cannot in good conscience offer to hold itself out as a host for nuclear waste. If nuclear energy and waste are as safe as you profess, why does the nuclear power industry need to hide behind the liability limitations of the Price-Anderson Act? In 2014, the U.S. Conference of Mayors called upon the U.S. Department of Energy to focus on the treatment and storage of radioactive waste on site to avoid further health and environmental impacts from the transport of waste produced from nuclear facilities. So those are my comments, and there were just two other incidents that, you know, again, it's about transparency and the kinds of things that we should know about. This I discovered, this was a gem. I was in the archives of the Tribune, I think. DOE cites the University of Chicago for nuclear safety violations. That was in 2006. I was living in my home at the time, didn't realize that that had happened. Apparently, there were a series of reviews, and it was determined that Argonne failed to adequately comply with DOE's nuclear safety regulations governing their programs. DOE's investigation of the safety review findings found that these issues have existed for a number of years, and the university's efforts to correct them were largely ineffective. DOE noted in a letter to Argonne National Lab that it was simply fortuitous that no harm had occurred to ANL staff given the breadth and duration of the identified violations. The $550,000 penalty was not paid because University of Chicago is a not-for-profit, and most of these nuclear labs work hand in hand with universities, so they get out of the fines. The other thing happened very recently. This is March of this year, and it happened in Texas, and it was written up, and I'm glad that NRC and DOE are doing their job in writing these things up. It's about us getting to know about it and knowing where to look for it. It seems that a truck carrying radioactive material had a package that fell out of the transport vehicle. The package was found by a member of the public on the highway. So accidents happen, and this is the kind of thing where you can get it right, and I'm not saying that the nuclear industry or the people at NRC or DOE or EPA aren't good people. I think everyone tries to do their job to the best, but accidents happen, despite our best intentions, and that 99 times out of 100 for it to happen right is not good enough. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we are ahead of schedule, so I think we're going to close the public comment period now. And I'm sorry? Pardon me? Can I have one more chance? Certainly. Do you have your glasses?
I don't need them.
Okay.
Thank you. This is going to be just a general comment. Before 1942, a tremendous amount of money was devoted to figuring out how to control a fission reaction. Then the fission reaction was controlled, and fabulous amounts of money were devoted to isolating plutonium-239 at Oak Ridge, Tennessee. It formed a whole community and an enormous Rube Goldberg apparatus for getting this isotope isolated. And then, after the bomb was dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, we're not even counting the cost to those communities of that event or those events. Then we have laboratories being established in Hanford and at something, Idaho. But it's now called the National Laboratory of Idaho, or Idaho National Lab, or something like that, where a lot of experiments were done with sodium-cooled reactor, and there was a really horrible accident where three people experienced a very sudden and extremely gruesome death. And then we're putting up nuclear power plants that have to be subsidized by the taxpayer. Then the taxpayer pays for the electricity and pays for taking care of the waste. I mean, the ratepayer pays for the electricity and taking care of the waste. But the taxpayer has subsidized the building, huge amounts of concrete, enormous quantities of carbon being put into the air to produce these materials. And now we're faced with 72,000 tons of nuclear waste that is going to be a further expense. And I just wanted to bring up the huge drain on the national treasure that this project represents. And now we're being encouraged to throw good money after bad to keep this process going. And I think we should cut our losses.
Thank you very much. So now I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Andrew Griffith, Associate Deputy Assistant Secretary for Fuel Cycle Technologies, to offer a few closing remarks. Andy?
Thank you, Jim. And I want to thank everyone for being here. But I would like to recognize Michael Rhyme, who is responsible for organizing and pulling this and the other public meetings together. So thank you, Mike. Hand for Mike. Not a simple task, but on behalf of Secretary Moniz, John Kotek, and the rest of the consent-based siting team, I want to thank all of you for attending this first public meeting on this really important issue. This is a national challenge. It's a national dialogue that we're trying to start, and we appreciate your being here at the first one. As we go forward and we try to develop an enduring process that supports a durable solution for this very challenging task that we have, your input is going to be absolutely essential. We're looking at a phased and adaptive process, one that learns as we go along, recognizing we can't predict out dozens of years ahead of us, that we have to be resilient to the changes that we face, but recognize that this is a really tough problem that we have to solve for the future generations of our country. And for that, we can't do it without the public input, and your input today, the frank and unvarnished comments that we had during both the comments here, the questions, as well as the facilitated discussions, are going to be really essential for us to develop this process, because it really does have to last. So with that, thank you, everyone. and hope to see you in the future. Melissa Bates, myself, Bill Boyle, Nancy Bushman, Mike Rhyme, we are going to be here tomorrow. If you want to continue this discussion in a smaller group, please see me before we leave here today. We'll make ourselves available. It's part of our program to get input from you. So don't leave here without making comment to me or making arrangements to see us tomorrow. And with that, I will turn it back over to Jim. Thank you very much.
All right. Real quick, thank you, Andy. Thank you, panel. Thank you, audience, both here in Chicago and on the webinar. Thank you, logistics people, for pulling this off. Difficult problem, great first step. Thanks again. Don't forget to pass in or email your evaluation forms. We're going to use the feedback from those forms to design subsequent meetings, so drop them off on the way out or email them to the department. This wraps up the formal part of the meeting, and the webinar will now close. For those who wish to join the informal discussion around the posters, please do so at your convenience. We invite you to attend. Thank you again. We are adjourned. Have a good evening.